Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Andy Park, co-founder and vice president of TeamCentral. We are an intelligent automation platform company. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Mahesh Baxi, co-founder and CEO at Provus.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you for joining us. I understand that you have a solution that helps enterprises quote services more accurately and efficiently. And I'd love to hear a little bit about you and your company.
Yeah, that's great. A little bit about us, our product, and kind of, why, we exist in the first place, right? Andy, we are a services quoting automation platform, and probably the only one that plays in the scope to quote SaaS product play. And by virtue of automating the entire services coding process, we allow our customers to enable the opportunity to cache motion for the services, right? I come from a number of years of deep domain expertise when it comes to code to cache for product. But what we are doing here at Provus is basically enabling that entire opportunity to cache motion for the services. And that's a segment that has been ignored for a number of years, and we'll talk more about that. But really, double clicking on that, Andy, what we do is really enable the customers to automate that services estimate quoting life cycle. That includes the scope discovery, which is the foundation of any services that you can provide to your customers. The entire estimation journey, because before you even kind of get into the commercials and understand what it is, because the scope is so foundational for any of the services that you provide, we start with that scope discovery, estimation, and the entire quoting life cycle, which typically involves a what-if scenario modeling. Because in the services, unlike the product, in the services, there are lots of different dimensions. There are lots of different angles in a way that you can model your services. That includes scope, the resources, the locations, different attributes of your resources. The fixed bid versus T&M. There are so many variables that plays a role. And so we actually support the entire what-if scenario modeling and automation around that. Plus approvals, we have built a collaboration engine because that's an absolute need in the large services, organizations to put a decent proposal together. And then, of course, the final output is a SOW or a proposal. And so we basically have our platform actually supports that entire life cycle from scope to quote end to end. That's really what we do.
That's interesting. And so is it and we'll probably talk a little bit more about it, but is it a similar to a configure price quote type of solution? There are various parameters that come into play, and you can mix and match and do some what if analysis as you're going through that quoting process.
So the conceptually, yes, but the reality is very different, right? So like I said, I have a very deep domain background when it comes to the CPQ or the product CPQ. I was the first employee of a company called Aptus, which actually went ahead and defined the whole quote to cash category. I led their customer success and professional services for a number of years until Thoma Bravo acquired us. Now, during the same time, there was a company called Stillbrick, which was our competitor, which was acquired by Salesforce, right? All of these companies were basically, automating the product CPQ as we know it, and which plays in the bigger quote to cash kind of transformation, right? Now, the typical product CPQs deal with what we call a price waterfall, which means that, if you are selling a product, you start with a certain list price, and then you apply a bunch of different parameters to come to the price that you want to sell the product at, right? And hence giving you the kind of price waterfall. Now, in the services, it's a very different phenomena, right? It's not a price waterfall. In the services, it's a multi-dimensional problem. First of all, the concept of scope doesn't exist. Either you are selling, if you are selling a iPhone, how many number of iPhones you are selling, what's the configuration, is it iPhone 10, is it iPhone 14, what is the size, what is the memory and stuff like that, right? So there are those finite set that you basically configure with. When it comes to services, you first of all have to understand what is the scope of that project, right? And then the scope basically decides, okay, is it going to be 5,000 hour project? And if it's 5,000 hour project, how is your resources going to be structured? And which is where the multi-dimensional aspects come in. On one side, you have scope. On the other side, you have resources. On the third dimension, you have all of your timeline, the resource ramp up, ramp down. But within the resources, Andy, the key aspect is, a rate card, because, the product has a fairly straightforward rate card. When it comes to resources, the rate card itself is fairly complex, because you could be offering project manager from US, and within US, it might be from Austin and San Francisco and, different countries. Now, maybe, you charge the same irrespective of where the project manager is, coming from, but your cost structure is significantly different based on where those resources are. And as you very well know, in the services business, as much as it's about the top line, it's also the fundamental thing is about the bottom line, which is the margins, right? And the margin optimization is such a key in the services coding business, right? And that's something that we do. That whole multi-dimensional aspect of how you deal with the scope, the timeline, the resource ramp up, ramp down, all of the pricing attribute of the resources, and then combine that with a very complex pricing adjustments, in a sense that you can just give a 10% discount flat out, but what happens in those cases is you are actually underselling your key resources, like your solution architects and project managers, and maybe even onshore resources, because maybe you have a different demand. Maybe there are other customers who are looking for those kinds of resources and ready to pay more. So when you just do a flat out discounts like that, you are underselling your resources. So what our software allows you to do is AI-led recommendation engine, and it says, hey, by the way, here is your availability, here is your resource forecast, and maybe instead of doing a 10% discount, you could actually shift your resource mix between onshore and offshore, or different locations that you offer, or maybe you change the resource mix itself and change, how you are quoting for it, and here is the risk parameter and stuff like that, right? So that's extremely critical. Typically, all of these things are done in Excel spreadsheets. And one of our customers told us that in a 6-month negotiation cycle, this is a large, services company who is our customer. They end up with 55 different Excel spreadsheet versions. And the CEO of this company said, I have no idea what I'm approving. I have no idea why I'm approving. Has everything been considered? Is this the most optimized version of the code that we can put together, right? So we actually solve for all of that. We have the entire, intuitive what if scenario modeling that you can look at it side by side. The approvers have a different view, all of that stuff, right? So it's a very, fundamentally, conceptually, it's same. Reality-wise, it's a very different affair when it comes to services quoting versus product CPQ.
I noticed on your website that you mentioned artificial intelligence. How does AI play a role in your solution?
That's one of my favorite questions. I think if you think of a lot of the trends that have evolved, right? One of the trend is obviously all about data. Right. In all of the industries that you look at, you are dealing with the intelligence and, stuff like that. And it's all about the data. Now, a lot of the industries have figured out how to collect the data, how to structure the data, and then apply all sorts of intelligence on top of that data. Guess what? The industry that we are dealing with, 96% of the time, our customers are on Excel spreadsheets. Right. That's and this includes customers across the globe, across all of the industries that we serve, and across different sizes, right, including the big ones. And so when you're dealing with Excel spreadsheets, there is absolutely no learning from the historical data. I mean, you do a quote, you do a deal, everything that you put in an Excel spreadsheet, and that Excel spreadsheet is just parked. Right? Nobody goes back and look at that Excel spreadsheet. Like, how did you negotiate? Why did you negotiate? What was the scope parameters? What was your sold margin versus realized margin? And what can you do better in the next quote? Because you could be doing the 100 quotes in the exact same way. And in all of those 100 quotes, which let's say if you win all of those, your sold margin could be 55%, but your realized margin could be like 40%. And there's absolutely no learning from that. So when we say AI-led recommendation engine, there are a lot of use cases, but the first and foremost, we are bringing all of this data onto the platform. through Provus. And then as customers start using and going through more of estimations and quotes, we actually, connect the dots in terms of, hey, what did you sell and how did you execute, and bring that together and say, by the way, you seem to estimating, for the simplicity's sake, let's say you seem to be estimating integration phase at 200 hours every time, but you know what? You are always spending 400 hours. Right? Based on your 100 projects that you have done, you are spending 400 hours. And here is a recommendation where you can actually, make sure that you are not going to lose in the next 101st deal that you're putting together. Right? And which is where a lot of ML AI based learnings will come in, the pattern matching, the scenario modeling, because, again, it's not a simple analysis. It's also, you could be serving consulting services industry, professional services industry, manufacturing industry, and there are a lot of those patterns that have to come together to say, okay, here is our recommendation for you to do a better quote, which allows you to win, which allows you to have better margins, and it does not impact your or improve your, basically it will help you improve your top line, right? So that's where the AI comes in. It's a huge gap when it comes to services quoting, and that's something that we are absolutely excited to fill.
And I know in our market, some of the developments in the world of open AI, chat GPT and some other things, to fine tune our models we're starting to have conversations about those. What do you attribute to making you successful so far? And are there any particular aha moments that you have along the way?
That's a great question, Andy. Lots of them. So I think the first and foremost, what I would attribute, our success so far, it's been a 2-year journey, amazing journey, and it's just the beginning, as we would say. I think I would attribute to 3 things. Number one, a great team that we have put together, and a team that has deep domain expertise, a team that has faced this challenge day in, day out in their past life, including me, right? I mean, I was running professional services for a product CPQ company, and I would do my entire business on Excel spreadsheets, right? Mm-hmm. And so this is a problem that has been very close to our chest, and this is something that we have faced this firsthand, right? And so it's extremely critical in terms of the team that we have put together, who come from a very deep quote to cash background of different kinds. Like, some of them come from CPQ, CLM, billing, different systems. But at the root of it, we all understand the problem statement really, really well, right? That's number one. Number two is really, our early customers and some of the aha moment that you ask. I think, and you said you are a founder yourself. So it's one thing for you to think, here is a problem that industry has, versus validating that with your early customers. And when you are pitching to early customers, and when that resonates so well with those customers, that's like, aha. I mean, it's not just mm-hmm. you thinking that there's a problem. It's actually customers who are actually resonating and saying that it's a problem, right? So we actually, in the early days, we actually talked to about 30 different prospects at the time, talked to them about the concept, the services quoting, and I would say 98% of them said, if you had a software as you are describing, we would buy it and we would pay for it, right? And that was really very encouraging and kind of aha moment for us, right? I think the third success factor is really the decision that we made early on to build our product on top of Salesforce platform, right? So we are native Salesforce, product built on force.com. And I think, there are lots of factors that kind of led us to that decision. First and foremost, I have a deep expertise when it comes to the Salesforce platform, because Aptus, my previous company, we were built on force.com, and we started very early on back in 2007 when force.com was not as mature as they are. And so from time to market perspective, I think it was very critical decision for us. But more importantly, when you look at solving scope to quote and solving the problem of opportunity to cash for services, that entire ecosystem today is made up of some sort of CRM, some sort of, CPQ solution. If you are a product company, if you're a services company, you are doing all of those things on Excel spreadsheets. And then you have some sort of PSS solution, then billing solution, invoicing solution, and all that. And then there is this big wide gap in terms of, all of them jump off to Excel spreadsheets to do, the estimation and coding together, and then bring those line items back and all that stuff, right? So, so when you think of the sales process, Salesforce dominates, from a CRM perspective and where the users are. Salesforce absolutely dominates that entire stack, and so that was a decision that led us to build our product on Salesforce platform. But I would say, I think that the great team, domain expertise, early customers, and customers who are supporting us and pushing us to dream big and execute big, and really, the decision to build on Salesforce has led us to a success where we are.
So thank you for that answer. So if you look at those success factors, I'm sure that there were hurdles along the way as well. What would be an example of one of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, there is no success without hurdles, and there are more hurdles than the successes. Success is felt overnight, but it's never an overnight success. It's a series of things that you have to do to get to that success. I think one of the hurdles, and we are getting better at that. The industry is getting better at that. But like I said, we, to a large extent, we actually compete with Excel spreadsheet or do nothing, right? And so when you are competing with Excel spreadsheets, you really have to find the buyers who are courageous, who are transformational, and who are ready to, take the challenge to transform your scope to quote process, right? And when I say transform, because it's not a lift and shift. Excel spreadsheet, you can be as creative as you like, and you can have 15 different tabs and 100 different macros running and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, as you scale and enterprises scale, it just doesn't give you the things that you're looking for from Excel spreadsheet. So when you are implementing and buying something like Provus, you have to be transformational. That includes the change management. So one of the hurdles that we faced early on, and we continue to face in our customer base, which is upper mid-market to enterprise customers, is really change management, right? Because a process transformation like what we're talking about, which is extremely mission critical for the companies that we deal with, the process transformation is something that we have to, partly we would say it's related to the product, but a large part of that, as we all know, it's the change management. It's all about the people, the training, the business case, the value realization, why we should do it, all of that stuff, which has nothing to do with product necessarily. But that's something that we always end up discussing with the customers. As soon as they see the product, they're like, yes, we understand this is the product that we want. This is fantastic, but let's talk about how it's going to be, how the journey is going to be inside our organization.
Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned early in the conversation was this ability to, evaluate different estimates, different scope definition estimates, quotes, things like that, and compare them to one another over time. So you can actually learn from the process, whereas the Excel spreadsheets are all over the place, and rarely do people go back and try to compare what happened and whether or not that produced the right results. So I definitely see the value in that.
Yeah. We call that what if scenario modeling within the quote. But what you are talking about is, if I've done 100 quotes, how do I compare them in a meaningful way, actionable way, and say, hey, your quote does show 55% margin, but guess what? You are not going to get that margin based on the 100 other things that you have done in a similar fashion, right? And that data, believe it or not, we ask our customers saying that, hey, if you want to start realizing the value of our AI models and, the recommendation engine and stuff like that, can you give us 300 historical quotes that we can consume and, put it in our system? And guess what the answer is? They're like, well, we just can't, right? It's all over the Excel spreadsheets, different tabs. There's no system, there's just no time or energy for anyone that to translate those Excel spreadsheets into the data that can be consumed. And so that's the reality of services quoting world today.
So I'm following you that the professional services is a key target market for you, but what does a typical customer look like, and what does an engagement look like with a customer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are three industry segments, Andy, that we go after. Professional services is one of them, as we call it. So what professional services mean to us is a software companies which actually have which requires services to implement, enable, and adopt their product for their customers, right? Where I come from, like Aptus, or if you think of Salesforce or DocuSign, right? All of these companies have services. So they sell the product, but they have services to enable that product in the customer's environment. Now, sometimes that services can be delivered through your own services organization, or it can be done through the partners. But irrespective of who is doing services, anyone who is delivering those services has to go through that entire scoping, discovery, estimation, quote life cycle, what if scenarios, approvals, all of that stuff. So that's our industry segment number one. The number two industry segment is consulting services. Now, consulting services at the top end, it's Accentures and Deloittes of the world, but there are thousands and thousands of companies in the mid-tier to enterprise grade, which are anywhere from $500 million to $5 billion in revenue. And those companies do multiple different things. Now, those companies could be partners with Salesforce, for example. And as a result, they still have to go through the scoping, estimation, and all that when they're bidding for the project, right? But the other parts that they do is they do transformation services, they do engineering outsourcing services, they do staff augmentation services, right? And in which case, the people and how you put your pod together itself is a scope. And these are usually multi-year contracts, right? 5 to 7 year contracts. There are complex pricing adjustments that are involved, like COLA, like location-based discounts, like volume-based discounts, and so on and so forth, right? So it's a fairly complex affair to kind of imagine that multi-dimensions and how you can optimize the resource mix, the location mix, the pricing, all of that stuff, right? So that's a consulting services. And we are an extremely good fit for, consulting services as well. And then the third one, which is super exciting for us, is what we call the asset-based services. The asset-based services are the companies, the hardware companies, which actually sell and track those hardware as an asset for many years to come. And those assets, based on how the asset is sold and configured itself, it has a multi-year recurring services that you usually, sell along with that, right? And so that's, again, a huge white space, a big gap. Most of those companies are struggling either with the services attachment rate, or they are actually doing all of those things manual and not able to bring all of those sales motions of their product and services together. And that's where we play. So those are the three industry segments: the professional services, consulting services, and asset-based services is what we go after.
Interesting. And I know we're close to time here. I just had two other questions. Maybe I'll I'll ask these, and you can choose which one you want to answer. So, one question is, in my world, I'm assuming yours as well. There's a constant flow of customer feedback, maybe feature requests, things like that. How do you stay true to your product roadmap and not get distracted by all these customer requests? And the other one is, what else would you, if you had an open floor, would you want to share about Provus to the audience? You could answer either one or both, but I'd love to hear both of those.
If you have time, I'll answer both. Right?
I have time. Yeah.
The first one, I think we are solving a age or legacy problem, right? I mean, and that's a good and bad thing. The good thing about that is, customers know about the problem that we are solving. They've faced this day in, day out. It's not like we have to educate them why this is a problem and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's a good thing. Now, the bad thing with that is really, that means that they are used to having so much freedom and flexibility of Excel spreadsheets, and they feel like, well, this is how our process is, and it's not going to be easy to change and what have you, right? So and so typically we do get flooded with a lot of feature requests from our customers. And I think we are like super obsessed. The entire team is super obsessed about customers and customer success, all of that stuff. But obviously, like you said, that doesn't mean that we can consume all of the inputs that we are getting and really build those products. So we do it in three different ways, Andy. So one is we are a small startup, but even within a small startup, we have what we call the innovation lab. And that innovation lab is focused on some of the futuristic stuff, like the AI recommendation engine, for example, right? I mean, that's not something that you can roll out overnight and build it and all that. There are a lot of patterns, there are a lot of data, a lot of ML stuff that you have to do. So we actually, all of the futuristic stuff that we have in our plan, in our vision, and I think it's at this point in time, based on the validations that we have received from the market, I think it would be fair for me to say that we are the thought leader when it comes to automating the services quoting and how we have approached our product, especially for enterprises and mid-market, right? And so the innovation lab is focused on something that's extremely strategic for us, very critical for us, and we know that is going to take us, take this journey to the next level, right? So we stay true to that. The second one is our, the product and engineering teams, which are basically, we funnel all of the requests through our prioritization engine. Part of the prioritization is, and what I believe is, you ask the question why 3 times to the customer. When customer gives you a feature request, ask 3 times why. Right? For every answer they give, ask why and ask why and ask why. And if you get, by the third time, if they're able to answer the why question, I think you get to why or what is the value realization behind the feature request that they're going to get. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if that works, then you prioritize that, bring it through the funnel, through our product council and get it lined up, as part of our product release. But then you get into sometimes you get into feature requests which might be critical for the customer for some reasons, but it may not necessarily fit into your roadmap overall. It may not be very generic. It may not be something that you want to prioritize and expedite right now, which is where our third arm comes in, which is the professional services arm, right? So while they are busy or they are implementing our product for their customers and enabling their processes and data and all that stuff, we actually have a way to build out some of those features for that customer. And then as time permits and as the priorities shift, we actually take those, builds into our product, make it generic, and then, make it part of our product release. So those are the 3 ways that we kind of, move the request and prioritize our requests.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And any last thoughts on what you'd like to share about Provus?
Yeah, I think I would like to talk about Provus and maybe because this is such it's a legacy or problem, but such a new category. I want to kind of talk about for Provus and other companies out there who are trying to address this problem. I think, and that is about probably my 3 predictions, for 2023 and beyond, right? And what's going to happen. I think the first prediction that I have is really, what 2023 is going to see is the unifying how you sell the products and services, right? There's a lot of talk about the quote to cash. There's a lot of companies who are doing the product CPQ. We are actually, kind of thought leader when it comes to services quoting and enabling that entire opportunity to cash motion when it comes to services. But I think, based on our conversations and based on how we see it, the trend and the prediction is that all of the companies by end of 2023 are going to implement their software in such a way that will allow their sales teams to go and sell products and services together, right? Mm-hmm. Which usually is not the norm today, but I think that will become the norm, right? The second one is the prediction is I think the AI will rule the services quoting. I mean, we have talked about the data. There's Snowflake and there's Tableau and there's data lakes and there's everyone is after the data, right? And a lot of those industries have solved collection of the data except the services quoting industry, right? And services quoting industry is still dealing with Excel spreadsheets. No one has the data in a structured way. No one has the data that they can do anything meaningful out of. So I think the AI is going to rule that services quoting. And what that means is I mean, we are betting big in terms of, our Salesforce platform, the ML, the Einstein, and now Salesforce Genie, all of that stuff. But I think, the customers who are visionary are going to get onto this transformation journey early on and realize the value of the data in a structured way for their services coding and bring that on. And then work on the AI models to come up with the recommendations. How do you sell better? How do you predict the win probability? All of that kind of stuff, right, for services coding. So I think that's number 2 prediction. Number 3, I think, is really the offering services and consuming services is only going to become more complex. What I mean by that is, when you think of companies who are looking to transform that opportunity to cash stack, it involves something like HubSpot or some sort of lead generation engine, to something like Salesforce CRM, to Salesforce CPQ, some Provus. There are PSs involved. There's a billing, there's order management, all of these systems are involved. Now you can imagine that if I was a consulting company who was going to do this transformation, I now have to put a code together where I have to understand what it takes for CLM and CRM and CPQ and services quoting and all of that stuff. So it's only going to become more and more complex to offer services and also to consume services for this organization, which means that you need to be nimble, you need to really move fast, you really need the accuracy and the customer experience to bring together to make sure that what you're putting in front of the customer is really, sets you apart. And I think that's absolutely going to happen. So those are the 3 predictions, right? I mean, the unifying product and services selling, the AI will rule the services coding, and then, the offering services and consuming services is only going to become more complex, is what we think is going to happen.
Very interesting. Mahesh, thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciated the conversation, and certainly to learn more about you and Provus. Please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy.